Yo, what the fuck is going down, everybody? It's your boy, Sauceman X. I'm checking back at you niggas with another goddamn video today. But anyways, man, we're back with another political videos, goddamn bitch. And you already see this by the title. This video is obviously going to be about the things that's been going on in politics within the past week. And you already see this by the title. This video is obviously going to be about Barack Obama. Okay, Barack Obama and how Barack Obama, went in and threw a birthday party for absolutely no legitimate reason, quote unquote, in the middle of a pandemic, where he essentially invited 500 people to show up to his house, and throw a birthday party. There was obviously no mask, nobody was social distancing, there was videographic and photographic evidence that none of these, restrictions are being put in place, and there was, I believe, confirmed to have 2 people there that weren't even vaccinated that showed up to the party not engaging in any of these activities. So I'm going to be talking about that and all of the hypocrisy from the mainstream media and how they're not going to report on this, and how they're going to make it seem like there's nothing wrong with this entire party when it basically disproves the entire narrative, because what they, they were doing is what they, they want to implement restrictions on us that, these people can apparently get away with. So I'm going to be talking about that and all the leftist hypocrisy within that. And I'm also going to be talking about Joe Biden, because apparently, Joe Biden last week basically went in and violated the Constitution, okay? He basically violated a Scotus, ruling where they basically ruled it unconstitutional to continue the eviction moratorium. So I'm going to be talking about that, and now Joe Biden essentially, basically did what the CDC wanted him to do, as if they have more power than the actual Supreme Court of the United States, the highest court in the land, just to enforce, the continuation of the eviction moratorium, which literally makes absolutely no sense. So I'm going to be talking about that and how it basically violates the Constitution. Now Joe Biden is actually much more authoritarian than presidents like Donald Trump, and for some weird reason the media doesn't have a problem with that. So let me just go ahead and get right on into this shit. So going on to the first point of this video, which is obviously the Barack Obama situation. So as I already said, Barack Obama essentially threw a birthday party. 500 people showed up. Okay, I believe it was like 500. I don't know the exact details. I've made people say that it's up to 700. I'm not even 100% sure, but all we know is that Barack Obama was intending to have a birthday party, and people knew that the birthday party was happening. And then once, Barack Obama, knew that everyone else knew that he was going to have a party, and, people were questioning him about the entire coronavirus, he said that the party would be, quote unquote, scaled back. But it turned out the party was not scaled back at all. Okay, the entire party continued to happen, and there was actually videos of people there, not social distancing, posing for pictures, dancing, doing all this weird shit. Nobody was wearing masks. Nobody even cared about social distancing. And of course, people on the left are going to say that, oh, it's because they were vaccinated, which is why it was okay for it to happen, which that makes absolutely no sense, because everyone on the left and, people like the CDC, you literally have people like the CDC, actually going in saying that you have to wear masks. Okay, you have to go in, you have to wear a mask even if you are vaccinated. So of course, that entire argument from the left doesn't even make any sense. So regardless if they were vaccinated or not, there was no reason for them to engage in this behavior, especially considering the fact that a lot of people who, I believe most people who are continuing to spread the coronavirus along with the Delta variant are people who are vaccinated. So we already know this literally makes no sense, and there's no justification for this entire situation. So we already know these people weren't even wearing masks, these people were not even social distancing, and these people were basically violating all of the rules that people on the left wants to play for us. So we already know for any rational, okay, which is another point we needed to get into. For any rational person in this country who actually, understands the hypocrisy, which is very fucking glaring, okay, at this point, anybody, with any kind of basic logical principles, anybody with basic common sense understands the hypocrisy of the situation. These people are actually starting to wake up. So this is actually a good thing, okay? This is actually a good thing, because one, we don't, people on the right, we don't actually believe in the entire, following social distancing rules and mask mandates, because there's no proof that they're, 100% effective. So we already know that, we don't have a problem with the actual birthday party itself. We just have a problem with the hypocrisy, and how people on the left are just going to completely ignore it and act like this is not a big deal, which is exactly what they're doing right now. They're actually going in acting like this is just, pretending like it doesn't exist, essentially, just because, they don't want to get exposed for the fact that they're very hypocritical, and it just shows you the actual corruption of people in power, how they can completely get away with doing things that they want to place on us. So we already know that this is actually a great thing, because it's going to be an eye-opening moment for the average person in this country that actually finds out about this entire situation, because it will just basically display the entire hypocrisy. And if it actually turns out that this event did not cause plenty of people to get the coronavirus, then that basically means that we shouldn't restrict any behavior that involves, parties, not social distancing and social gatherings. That should not be prohibited, because if it's okay for them to do it and it's still not super spreading, then it's okay for us to do it. So we already know, rules for thee, not for me, that entire fucking hypocrisy. That's essentially what's happening with it. And another point we needed to get into is that this is obviously because people on the left, the mainstream media, considering that they didn't even report on this, and they're going to act like, Barack Obama is this amazing human being. You literally had, more hypocrisy that needs to be exposed, which is another point we needed to get into, is that I believe, when Donald Trump, okay, last year when he was actually doing rallies in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, everyone was complaining about it being a super spreader. You had the mainstream media continuing to push all of this propaganda just because Donald Trump engaged in a social gathering or, a Trump rally. Somehow that's a horrible thing. Somehow it's a super spreader event, but it's perfectly okay, for Barack Obama to do the exact same thing and create an entire event at his own house to, potentially spread the coronavirus. So it's okay when they do it, but not when anyone else does it. So we already know they're obviously not going to report on this, and this obviously comes to the, causes people to come to the basic logical conclusion, which is why I said that it's a good thing that this happened, because people are going to realize the hypocrisy of the left even more, is that it obviously shows that people on the left literally do not care about stopping the spread of the coronavirus. Everyone on the left who claims to care about, medical freedom, you have people like Dr. Fauci, have all these people not saying anything negative about this entire super spreader event. It actually shows you that they don't actually care about stopping the spread of the coronavirus. They're just trying to antagonize people who are going against their authoritative agenda, because they literally want the elites, people who are very powerful, to enforce rules on people that they don't even follow themselves, because the entire point is not actually to slow the spread based on the hypocrisy that I explained. They actually want to control people's lives and control the way people think, and actually get people and manipulate people to think that they're doing this to stop the spread, when in reality they just want they have an authoritative agenda to try to take over people's lives. So we already know this is the entire premise behind what they're doing, and it's pretty fucking obvious that they're doing it. And going on to the next point of this video, which is obviously the entire eviction moratorium situation. So we already know that, throughout this entire pandemic, you had people, dealing with problems with potential eviction because, the government basically shut down the entire economy and destroyed people's lives and made people dependent on the government. So of course a lot of people are going to be having some financial problems, which essentially destroyed the economy. So, Democrat policy is basically what's destroying the economy, not anybody who is Republican. So we already know that, this entire eviction moratorium is happening, and we already know that, considering the fact that things are starting to open up again, it only makes logical sense, and the Supreme Court actually confirmed this, a few months ago, that it doesn't make sense to, continue to withhold fucking payments, that people actually have to make with the property that they own or the property that they're renting. It literally makes absolutely no sense, considering the fact that the entire pandemic is, pretty much over, even though they're trying to start it again with more lockdowns. But they're, people should be going back to work, and people should be able to pay, to actually live at the place that they're living at, because we're not actually undergoing the government, the government-run pandemic that basically happened last year. So we already know that the entire pandemic should be finished with, for the most part, at least to the point where people are able to pay rent again. But we already know that the CDC, the CDC, and we already know the CDC is completely corrupt, is suggesting that we should actually extend the eviction moratorium for another 60 days, which basically means that people who would be evicted from their houses or, evicted from, any place that they live in can no longer be evicted anymore, even if they literally pay absolutely nothing, which we already know it's obviously unconstitutional by definition, considering the fact that the Scotus ruled it unconstitutional, and it's also obviously a horrible thing because it's just going to encourage people to not go back to work even more, which is going to further deplete the economy, and it's also going to encourage landlords, for example, to continue to not make money. And they're basically just having a bunch of people not even paying for the service that they provide. So the landlord's gonna have even more financial problems because of it, and they're basically extending it for longer periods of time. So this is basically unconstitutional. The SCOTUS ruled it unconstitutional, and it is obviously an impeachable offense, for the president of the United States to say that we can just go in and just overrule the Constitution or overrule a SCOTUS ruling just to do what the CDC wants us to do, which basically makes absolutely no sense. And for some weird reason, people don't even understand that the CDC does not grant people rights. So what Joe Biden essentially did was unconstitutional by definition, completely bypassing the entire SCOTUS ruling. So this is basically unconstitutional. And going on to the next point of this video is that it's obviously an impeachable offense, considering the fact that if you go in and deliberately violate the Constitution, then obviously that would be worthy of, having an impeachable offense, which is pretty hilarious because nobody on the mainstream media, which is obviously, expected, nobody in the mainstream media is talking about this. We already know when Donald Trump was president, every little thing that he did, they just completely misconstrued it as saying he's violating a certain amendment, like, oh, Trump is violating the 14th Amendment, he's violating this certain amendment, even though they couldn't actually quantify what it was. There was no SCOTUS ruling that he deliberately overran, like in this case. There was literally no evidence that what he did was unconstitutional as president, but they completely made an entire charade, misinterpreted everything that he was doing to create a conspiracy theory to make it seem like he was violating the Constitution. But when Joe Biden deliberately violates a Scotus ruling that determined eviction moratoriums to be unconstitutional, they have absolutely no problem with it. Okay, they have absolutely no problem with it. They're calling Trump a dictator because he was doing things that wasn't even violating the Constitution, but they're not. But they're saying Biden is just this amazing fucking president, even though he's deliberately doing things that do violate the Constitution. So that basically is just proving more hypocrisy, and this should obviously be an impeachable offense, since this is obviously going against the Constitution. And another reason for why it should be an impeachable offense is because it's literally implying that the CDC, okay, it is literally implying that the CDC gets to go in and govern people's rights for them, okay? As if, the CDC, okay, a random, Center of Disease Control who should not, who basically has absolutely no business having more power than the highest power or court in the land, which is obviously the Supreme Court and the Constitution itself. They're basically, Joe Biden is implying that the CDC is more important than the actual Constitution, and it's more important than the actual Supreme Court, which is literally a horrible thing, okay? And this, people on the left, for some weird reason, they just religiously follow the CDC and everything the Biden administration tells them, to the point where they literally think that the CDC is the overlord of what all policies should happen in this country. As it pertains to all policy in this country, it should all be determined by what the CDC thinks is best, and not the actual Supreme Court, who should have, which even constitutionally speaking, has more fucking authority and more power than the fucking CDC does. So we already know they're basically perfectly okay with them having more power than the actual Supreme Court and the actual Constitution, which literally makes absolutely no fucking sense, and it shows you how brainwashed they are, because they think that medical experts, quote-unquote medical experts, should determine what laws should happen in this country as it pertains to people's fucking, people's fucking mortgages and the rent that they have to pay, which literally has nothing to do with, that literally has nothing to do with, the coronavirus pandemic, has nothing to do with what the CDC job is supposed to be. So this literally makes no sense, and this is why Joe Biden should actually be impeached. And going on to the next point of this video, which is what I was talking about earlier, is that Joe Biden is obviously much more of a dictator of a president than Donald Trump actually was, which is literally some crazy shit, because we already know people on the left were constantly complaining about Trump being a fascist, being an authoritarian, but they have no problem with Joe Biden literally being an authoritarian, overruling the Constitution. And not only is he overruling the Constitution based on the Scotus law, or the Scotus, rule that basically said that this thing was unconstitutional as it pertains to the evictions, we already know that Joe Biden is obviously violating more immigration laws, perfectly okay with allowing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to illegally immigrate into this country, completely defying all current immigration laws, which that's another law that's broken, along with violating the Constitution. And he also wants to get rid of guns. Okay, his entire gun control narrative, there's nothing more tyrannical than, willing to, fucking violate 2 amendments in the Constitution while bypassing all immigration laws in this country, which is essentially what Joe Biden is doing. So he's essentially becoming more tyrannical, wanting to violate, or actually violating more constitutional amendments than Donald Trump has ever done, and he's overruling a Scotus hearing all on top of that, and allowing, a private corporate entity of the CDC that this entire corporate entity of the CDC should have more power than the Constitution actually says should have more power, which is obviously, fucking federal government, the Scotus, the Supreme Court of the United States. So we already know this literally makes absolutely no sense, and Joe Biden is obviously much more of a dictator, and he actually wants to be more of a dictator, and people on the left have absolutely no problem with this authoritarianism, even to the point Okay, even to the point of literally wanting to turn this entire country into a fascist police state to try to force people to be vaccinated against their will, which can literally only be done, nationwide through a fucking dictatorship. Okay, people on the left have no problem with Joe Biden executing that authority, turning this country to a police state, basically, going against everyone's freedom just to force people to get vaccinated against their will for absolutely no legitimate reason. I explained why this doesn't make any sense in plenty of other videos. So they literally want Joe Biden to engage in all these forms of authoritarianism, which literally meets up to the definition of what they want him to be, which is obviously a dictator. They want him to be a dictator, while they completely, compare Trump to being a dictator, for absolutely no legitimate reason, but they're perfectly okay with Joe Biden engaging in these dictatorial behaviors, which literally makes absolutely no sense, and it proves their hypocrisy. What's honestly doesn't make any sense for why people on the left are, don't even seem to have a problem with this, even though they, which obviously proves that they actually support authoritarianism, and basically people on the left are the epitome of everything they claim to be against, which is what I've been saying for the longest time on this YouTube channel. Everything that they claim us to be, they are actually the epitome of, and this is actually seeing how it plays out. So we already know, we'll see what happens throughout the entire future of this entire eviction moratorium. In my personal opinion, the Scotus will obviously jump in, if he tries to extend it any longer after the 60-day time period, which hopefully that does happen. But this is obviously a good thing, because more and more people are realizing how tyrannical Biden is, and more and more people are realizing the hypocrisy of this entire coronavirus situation because of the entire, birthday party that Barack Obama threw for absolutely no legitimate reason. So anyways, literally some some crazy shit, but this is obviously going to cause us to gain more power because, you know, people are realizing the absolute, you know, obvious hypocrisy coming from these leftists and coming from the mainstream media. Anyways, tell me what you think in the comment section of this shit. It's your boy, the Sauceman X. I'm checking the fucking out of your